On the x-axis here, we have time. Okay. All right, let's just make a landmark here. This is threshold. Right, about negative 55 here. Okay, now the first series of events we talked about was the initial, let's make this negative 70. The initial depolarization, which was caused by the closing of those potassium channels and the opening of the funny channels. Then there was a slow depolarization, followed by a rapid depolarization here, right? And then there was our repolarization. So let's draw a couple of landmarks here. So let's talk about this one in pink. Let's put this one in blue. Okay. So the first thing that happens here is, we said, the closing of potassium channels. All right, let's write that here, closing of potassium channels, followed by the opening of, they're called funny channels, but they allow the movement of sodium and potassium. So I'll put that in brackets. All right, they're called funny channels. Okay, and that is going to increase the membrane permeability to sodium and decrease the membrane permeability to potassium. Okay, that's that first step. And so as a result, that is going to start the depolarizing of this cell. The second step is, now we have the opening of some slow calcium channels, right? So the opening of slow calcium channels. We also have the closing of those funny channels. Okay? So what we have here now is that calcium is starting to move into the cell, and sodium is no longer moving, all right, because we close those funny channels. So this is going to increase the membrane permeability for calcium, because now it's moving, and decrease the membrane permeability for sodium. You guys see that there? All right. Decreasing the membrane permeability for sodium and increasing the membrane permeability for calcium. So now calcium is rushing into the cell, not as fast as a rate as if there were fast channels open. This is a slow, let me just highlight this here, a slow calcium channel. So we're gonna have a little bit more depolarization, but not the rapid depolarization that's coming next, okay? The third area of this graph here in purple is where we have the opening of our fast calcium channels. Okay, and this is going to rapidly depolarize the membrane. These are faster acting calcium channels, also called L-type channels. Okay, so I'm going to just highlight here fast, which is going to rapidly depolarize the membrane. And so this is going to increase, further increase the membrane permeability for calcium. Okay, everyone still with me? Any questions? All right. Now, after all this is said and done, at this point, what do we have open? We have calcium channels open, the fast ones, right? we have potassium channels still closed, okay, because that's how we started out here. And those two phenomena are going to flip-flop, and that is going to repolarize the cell drastically, okay? So now we're going to have closing of those calcium channels, right? No more calcium entering the cell. And opening of potassium channels. So now that we're opening potassium channels, we're pushing potassium out of the cell. We're also stopping the movement of calcium into the cell. So that is going to rapidly repolarize the membrane here. Membrane is going to head for negative now, because we're now pushing potassium out and stopping the influx of calcium. Okay? And so this is going to decrease the membrane permeability for calcium and increase the membrane's permeability for potassium. And as a result of those net movement, right, stopping the calcium from going into the cell and forcing the potassium out, we're going to spiral down back to negative 70 millivolts. Okay? And this is the electrical basis of the pacemaker cells. These activities are going to differ for the contractile cells, and we'll talk about that shortly. Okay, so let's just walk through this one more time here before we move on. All right, so this is an active potential. I'm just showing you what's going on in the cell. You have that slow depolarization, which is the spontaneous depolarization in the cell. All right? Slowly. Then there's going to be a rapid depolarization, much quicker. It's going to spike, followed by a repolarization, back to negative 70. All right? So this is the ionic basis for those activities. We said that this initial depolarization here was the movement of what? We said the closing of potassium channels, right? So potassium is no longer moving here. And the opening of those funny channels. Opening of those funny channels. And those funny channels basically push sodium into the cell. So pushing sodium into the cell is going to start the depolarization process. It's going to start depolarizing. It's going to start depolarizing very slowly here until we now open what type of channels? Calcium channels. So we now open up those calcium channels. We're not going to close the funny channels. And so the only ion that's moving here is calcium. Calcium is going to slowly move into the cell. It's called slow polarization phase. When we get to threshold, we are going to open what type of channel? Fast calcium channels. So the opening of those fast calcium channels is going to rapidly depolarize the membrane. When we rapidly depolarize the membrane, it's going to spike here. And that's going to be followed by the closing of those calcium channels. And then we're going to reopen those potassium channels that we initially had closed. And so that is going to push potassium out of the cell, which is going to make it negative, and stop calcium from moving in the cell, which is even further going to make it negative. And that is going to rapidly repolarize this membrane, right? Those two actions.